Now, what's all this hullabaloo about Ndamukong Suh? Let's talk about it here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Vikings listeners get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagements. Use code LOCKEDON at checkout. Today on the show, we actually have some whispers to talk about, some rumor stuff with Ndamukong Suh. Apparently there is some interest with Ndamukong Suh and the Vikings. We'll talk about that interest. We'll talk about what he does, his cost, how it would kind of change and not change the texture of the Vikings defense. So we'll go into all of that. But first, let's start with the actual rumors themselves. So I guess this starts on Monday on NFL Live on ESPN, and Ndamukong Suh comes in as a guest analyst and talks about his own situation. He is currently a free agent. He was a Buccaneer for the last couple of years, but now he's a free agent. He's 35 years old. So the speculation is, well, he's going to go back to the Bucs. He's going to retire. What's the deal? And he weighs in on this and he says, well, I'm not done. I'm not going to hang him up, but I'm not going back to the Buccaneers, which is essentially bidding's open. What do y'all got? Come at me, teams. And in that segment was with Mina Kimes and a couple other people. Mina Kimes was like pitching teams to him. It's a very fun segment. He's pitching the Raiders and Chargers to him. He seemed to be open to that. And I don't know. It seems like he's open to a lot of ideas. So on Tuesday, it's reported by somebody at USA Today, and then I saw it was amplified via Pro Football Talk. But the report is that he's had multiple conversations with the Raiders, and also that the Vikings are a team to watch. So that's where we first get into the conversation. And then later, Josina Anderson says, Raiders out of the running. It's not going to happen with the Raiders, leaving only the Vikings as a reported team. Now, again, I think there's a lot of suitors. I think there's going to be a lot of suitors here. And I think Suh is saying, all right, bidding's open. Who's into it? And the Vikings are one of those teams. And I think that's about as far as we are. So don't go getting your hopes up, all right? We're a long way away from that promised land, but it is enough of an idea right now where it's worth talking about its merits. But listen, don't hang your entire personality on it, and then when he goes and signs with like Cleveland or whatever, don't be sad, all right? Now, I'm going to get the burning question out of the way, which is how are they going to afford him? After all, they're paying Kirk Cousins, and that means they can't sign free agents. They never will. They've never signed a free agent. It hasn't happened. So how do they overturn all that? Well, the answer is by stealing the Declaration of Independence. I'm sorry, the cap stuff just like is so annoying. Like, learn what you're talking about or don't talk about it. So the way Suh, I think, is going to work. For one, he had a base salary of like $1.5 million this year. I think he made $3.2 million in 2021. So the dude is not exactly prohibitively expensive. The Vikings are sitting on $10.9 million in cap space. That is not all available for them to use functionally, because they will have to, when they go down to the 53-man roster, or when they actually do 53-man cutdown day, that incurs a whole bunch of costs, including, I'll call it like an $8 million rule of thumb is what that's going to cost, because they have to pay about $500,000 to every one of their 16 practice squad guys. So that's $8 million. Plus, the way the cap is right now is it only counts the top 51 players. I don't know. I never figured out why it was the top 51 and not the top 53, but it's only the top 51 players. And those guys are like what count, and every contract lower than that doesn't count toward the cap. And that way you can have a 90-man roster that fit under a salary cap that was designed for 53-man rosters. And that's just kind of like a camp thing. So when cutdown day happens, those last two players need to be added, plus the practice squad. However, if, say, somebody in the fourth year of their rookie deal, like this happened with Jalen Holmes, gets cut and replaced by somebody cheaper, it can sort of mitigate that a little bit. So I say rule of thumb, $8-ish, $9-ish million. So they've got like $2 or $3 million, I would say, in actual usable cap space. It's not a ton, but that that'll pay for a Suh, more or less, right? And if you do need extra money, you could do like tiny little, you could restructure $1 million of someone's contract and nobody will care about it. Or you can do a bunch of, you can do something like a 2-year deal with Suh and put a void year on it, and then it's fine. Like it's close enough where to find the nickels and dimes that you need to make it work is basically trivial. So the answer to can they afford him is yeah, probably. Like, oh, actually, yeah, almost certainly, unless somebody comes in and says, we'll pay you $15 million in Ndamukong Suh, at which point I think you say, all right, you can go do that then. I don't think you'd be interested in that even if you had the cap space. So that's where we're at on the money. But really, with Suh, here's what I want to talk about mainly and for the rest of the show here. What does Suh actually do? He is 35. He is a defensive tackle. We already have Phillips and Tomlinson, so what's the deal with that? Where does he fit? How many snaps does he play and all that stuff? Let's really imagine what the world of Suh on the Vikings actually manifests itself as. Like, how does this actualize? And what does it look like? And do we want that situation? And what do we have to give up to get it? Probably not a ton, but, do we have to give up cap flexibility on somebody like Dalvin Cook if we're going to restructure a contract? And is that worth what Suh will bring? My answer is going to be a pretty resounding yes. I'm like really into this idea. I really, really like it, and I'd be pretty hype if they did it. But I mean, obviously easier said than done, right? But I think they should definitely try, and it sounds like they are trying, and I'm super in their corner on that. So let me kind of explain myself, because a lot of people don't like it. They think that he's too old, or that he's like a dirty player or whatever, although that is a very old thing. If it's 5 years old, you got to let that go. So we'll talk about all of that. But first, let me talk to you about your car. You got to take care of that thing, right? Your car is important to you, and it gets you from point A to B. And if it starts not getting you from point A to B, that can be a very expensive thing to deal with. So get your car's problems dealt with ahead of time. And if you need a little bit of help with the mechanic cost anyways, go to rockauto.com. Look, a mechanic's going to upcharge you for those parts. Or if you go to like an auto body shop to get the car parts and you say, hey, do you have this for a 2017, whatever my car is? And they got to go, we got to check in the back. No, we got to order it special. We'll charge you for that. And it'll be here in 8 to 10 business days. No. None of that stuff. Go to rockauto.com. You can ask your Rock Auto the same exact question. They've got a catalog, make, year, model, browse the part you're looking for, and they'll give you all kinds of options that are compatible with your car, and you can buy it directly from the manufacturer. So cut out the brick and mortar middleman that's going to upcharge the hell out of you. Why pay 30, 50, even 100% more for car parts when Rock Auto has you covered? They've been doing this online for 15 years. They are a family-run company. They're looking out for you, and they know what they're doing. So head on over to rockauto.com, and whatever it is you buy there, let them know in the How You Heard About Us section at checkout that Locked On sent you, because if you don't, the rabbits will start eating hostages appendage by appendage. Rock Auto, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Apologies for how violent that ad read got. That one got away from me. The NBA is covering their draft live. The Locked On NBA channel, if you go to Locked On NBA on YouTube, they will have a live draft show, not unlike the one we did for the NFL, which is really cool, really fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the NBA guys all come up with. So go check that out at Locked On NBA on YouTube. All right, let's talk about Suh, and let me talk first about some of the concerns, I guess. Now let's do a baseline. So the baseline of Ndamukong Suh, he's a defensive tackle. He has played in 3-4 systems, a more defensive endish role. What we're looking for, part of what I like about Suh is that it matches exactly where I think kind of the last true need on the defense is. And I say, there are weaknesses on the defense, but they're not needs. Like, corner is a weakness, but that's because there are rookies, and rookies will satisfy the need. It's just they're going to take a while to do it, so it's a weakness right now, but it will happen. Right now, in our base defense, which is more of a sub package, I mean, this thing's going to be on 20% of the time. They are currently looking at starting a competition between Armon Watts and James Lynch, or somebody like Jalen Twyman as a dark horse. That's a competition for what will functionally be a starting role. And I don't think that's good enough. And I kind of hoped that they would get somebody in the draft that could bolster that competition or something like that. But if they go out and get Suh, he played mostly in 4-3 defenses for most of his career. And he played as pass rush and 3 technique Sheldon Richardson type. And usually when you get that guy into the 3-4 thing that the Vikings are doing, that's the role they play, which is like really close to the same role. Like you shift them over half an inch and then they basically play the same gaps. Like it's a very similar role. So this is not like scheme fit and stuff is whatever. And he has played in 3-4s at this role before. So like there's definitely no concern about like scheme fit or whatever. And it's a very elegant solution and a very direct solution to a problem I think there is on the Vikings defense right now. So that's part of why I like it. But talking about Suh himself. If you're not familiar with how Suh plays, he's been in the league for 12 years. He's a known commodity here. He beats double teams, he beats one-on-ones, and he defends the run well. Like he's a very all-around player. This is not a specialist. This is not a guy with like kind of one fastball and that's what he does. No, he does everything, and he does everything very well. And he does everything very well even in the last couple years. When he was, well into his 30s, he's still doing everything well. He's still beating double teams. And on the Bucks, he didn't get a lot of double teams because he was next to Vita Vea, and he got a lot of one-on-ones, and he beat those too. And he held his gap, and he penetrated, and he got run stops. You put him on the field, and he does good things. And it's kind of not really any more complicated than that. And that is, I'm into it, right? Like, yeah, please get that dude in purple. Let's put him on the field. But I think if there is one thing that Suh is known for, it's defeating double teams. It's splitting that double team and actually getting the penetration, and that puts offenses in their protections in a really, really difficult spot. If you are double teaming Ndamukong Suh, that means you're probably giving a one-on-one to Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter, and that's probably not good. So I don't know if Suh sees a lot of double teams on the Vikings, but if he's the one seeing double teams, something is going very right or very wrong on the offensive side of the ball. But it seems like the Donatel defense, one of the major goals of the Donatel defense is to screw up your protections, to make you call a protection that doesn't actually address what we're doing and kind of trick you into calling the wrong thing. And Suh, as much as anybody else who would be on that line, could take advantage of that. So the cost seems pretty doable. The player, it will surprise you to know that the guy who's been like all-pro a million times is pretty good. However, there's a whole bunch of stuff that people might be a little uncomfortable with. He's a little older. What do we do about that? He has a reputation that he kind of got in Detroit that we probably remember very much. I want to talk a little bit about that. So let me try to soothe your concerns, because I think most of them are more reputational and involve jumping to some conclusions I don't think you should jump to. I don't think it's good practice. But first, let me talk to you about the best tasting protein bar on the planet. It is Built Bar, and they have a new, completely unreasonable flavor. They get more and more unreasonable, and that's awesome because they still are like low calorie, low sugar, like 8 grams of sugar in this one, and then like 130 calories, and packed full of 16 grams of protein. It is mud pie. It's just a chocolate bomb. Like, it's all covered in 100% chocolate and tastes like chocolate, and there's chocolate on it. Like, if you're a chocolate lover, this is for you. It is the midnight chocolatey snack that you wish you could have, but you're trying to be good. And this, you can be good, guilt-free, totally. It's awesome. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off of your order. Mud pie comes in both a classic Built Bar and also a Built Puff, like a marshmallowy kind. It's a lot fluffier and lighter and chewy like a marshmallow. It's really nice, but it's that same chocolate bomb. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. There's a few things that pop up whenever Ndamukong Suh pops up that I guess I want to talk about. And the first one is, a lot of people are like, oh, he's a dirty player. And he did have a reputation for dirty. He had some not great penalties like 8 years ago. And it's been a long time since Ndamukong Suh was that player. That was a young man. That was a young, headstrong guy. And it's been a long time. Like, that's really all I can say is, like, it's been a while. And it seems like this is very much behind him. Like, with somebody like Suh, you're not paying for what he was. If you were, he would cost $20 million. You're paying for what he's going to be. And I don't think we're going to see him dress up in a Vikings jersey and, like, stomp on someone's hand. It's been too long. It's very clearly behind him. So there's that. But really, the most probably common reason that we're going to see that people wouldn't like a move if they do sign Ndamukong Suh is a 35-year-old defensive tackle. Saying that as though defensive tackle as though the position he plays is not a direct need on the Vikings right now. But for some reason, people still think that defensive tackles like aren't a premium position or something like that, which the idea of a premium position is dumb, all right? Like 11 people are on the field and any one of them can be exploited if they suck, and any one of them can break the play if they rock. So just get the best 11 you can find. That's where I'm going to fall on a lot of these positional value things. You're probably overreacting to it if you think that not a premium position means don't spend like $3.5 million on a guy. So there's that. But also that he's 35. But here's the deal. What does it mean when you're this? We got to go a little deeper. Why don't you want an old player? Like, why don't you want what about age is just a number, right? Like, so it does not intrinsically carry any, there's not, well, he got a sack, but sacks don't count if you're 35 and older. Like, that's not the case, right? There's a reason why we don't like older players. Typically, they probably slow down a little bit, and so maybe you're in danger of paying for what an old player did in his prime and not what he's capable of doing in the future, right? That's sort of the fear. And we just have to articulate that out loud, right? Like everybody knows that that's the fear, but that's what we're afraid of. So does that apply to Suh? That's the question we never ask. We just go, 35-year-old player? Bad. And we just skip the part where we go, but does that apply to this guy, right? That applied to Everson Griffin last year, who was like pretty good, but was very clearly not ready to be. And of course, he had his own thing and stuff, but he was very clearly not the player that he was, 4 years ago. That applies in some way to Patrick Peterson, and that's why he doesn't cost what he cost for like the Cardinals, and he's playing on much smaller deals, and he's making a lot less money. And I think the same thing is really applying to Suh here. So does it apply to Suh? Well, there's two worries, right? One, has he slowed down? Maybe a little. His snap count has decreased from, high 700s to low 700s, but he still played over 700 snaps last year. So it's not like this is a guy that needs to come in for, 2 drives a game and that's all he can ever do. He played like 60-ish% of the snaps for the Buccaneers last year. So continue that trajectory. He'll play something like half of them, and that's about what this rotational role would be. So I think that fits fine. And the second thing is older players might be a little more fragile, right? I don't know if that's actually true. Like, I genuinely don't know if that actually is like backed up or if it's just a thing like, you get older and things hurt more. But like, I don't know if that actually bears out in athletics. Somebody tell me. I don't know. I genuinely don't know the answer to that. But are we worried about Suh's durability? The dude played 12 years and he has never missed a game to injury. At defensive tackle, that is a person who is probably playing through injuries a lot. I mean, you're not that lucky, right? You're getting hurt and he's probably just playing through them. Probably not great for you, and he probably just isn't telling his coaches or whatever. But if you're worried about availability, this is the last guy to be worried about. So, I don't know. I don't see the problems of a 35-year-old player really applying to Suh in the way that they would apply to, like, I see a little bit of, you're a little older. This applies to Patrick Peterson a little bit. He's not as fast as he used to be, and we have to sort of design what we ask him to do on defense a little differently because of that. With Suh, it seems like you can basically ask him to do what he did on the Bucs last year, and that should be pretty good. So, okay, if we're not worried about him being old, and I really don't think you should worry about him being old. If you're worried about a 35-year-old defensive tackle, what you're doing there is you're reframing like what Suh is as like picture a 35-year-old defensive tackle, a guy well past his prime, probably retiring next year or whatever. You are not describing Suh anymore. You are taking the worst thing about Suh and saying, well, he's just that. And he very clearly isn't. I don't know. Watch him play or look up Google the guy before you say something like that, that like, I get weird about like when we break people into categories and then just kind of say like, well, this is what that 35-year-old defensive tackle, bad. You don't want those. You don't want any of those. But what if one of them's good? No, you don't want like. But what if this one's good this time? Well, other ones haven't been good. Okay, but is that this one, though? Like this is the argument that I can see happening. Like but what about this guy though? This particular person? Because I don't know if I necessarily want all the 35-year-old defensive tackles, but I do want as many Ndamukong Suhs as I can find. So that's where I get with like the age of his, and then if you're worried about the cost, look, if that contract, if he signs with the Vikings and it's not more than like $4 million, you can basically forget about the cost. It's just a rental. We got a guy in for a year. We found a way to do it. Great. Let's see if it works out. And if it doesn't, or if they don't make the playoffs again and it was all a waste, or well, then everything was a waste, right? So if he does sign or whatever, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about what they would have to do to make the cap space and how to kind of deal with that. But for now, I think we're all just watching and waiting, because I'm sure there's more than just the Vikings who are in on it, but the Vikings are in on it. And that's pretty exciting and cool. Ndamukong Suh, he rocks. And if you don't think so, you're probably overthinking it. Tomorrow, I have no idea what we'll talk about. We'll figure something out. In the meantime, check out the Locked On NBA Draft. Check out the Locked On NFL podcast. The Locked On NBA guys are doing an ultimate mock draft as well. It's on Odyssey or wherever you find your podcast. Just search Ultimate NBA Mock Draft. They're doing it just like we did, where everybody from each show is making their pick, and they have like Odyssey experts. It's really cool. So go check all that stuff out. I'll see y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.